Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next edition of the DFS Down Under Show. Smatho, 10, and Big Hef are back here for another bumper episode of the show. We're up to round 10 in the AFL in this compressed fixture, and as always, we're back on a Tuesday night just to break down whatever AFL game is coming up next, and we've got the great Wednesday doubleheader to break down shortly. But let's bring in Hef. How are you, mate?
Good, mate. I couldn't have told you what day it is. It just seems like every day is just another day with footy going on. And I took your lead in getting a haircut today. They really should give you beanies this time of year because I went walking out. It's basically snowing down here. It was just, I've never been so cold in my life. But you have to stay inside for the next few days, I think.
Now, welcome to all our viewers to the show. And just for those who are new here, myself and Hef, we do live down here in Hobart, which has copped a absolute snow blast throughout the day. All the roads are shut in and out of town at the moment. So good luck to us if we get through the night tonight. It's not, I mean, we can sook about all we want, but at least we've got some AFL footy to watch every night so far.
Yeah, big shout out to the guys in Launceston too, because the only good thing in Launceston's been shut, and that's the road out of it.
Also, I want to bring up a bit of a shout out to one of our loyal viewers from last week who reached out on the Daily Fantasy Rankings Twitter handle, which is @Rankings and DFS. So make sure you follow that. He received some birthday love during the week, and I heard
you cut it out, Smatho. I'm sure I said something right at the end.
And I heard that you did say apparently you said something right at the end of the show, and apparently editing left it out. So
yeah, you stitched me up there.
So a big shout out to our friend there who's having his birthday this week. Happy birthday to you. Hopefully you'll receive many happy returns. All right, Hef. We are here part of Daily Fantasy Rankings, and as always, we're the free resource for AFL data tools for AFL Daily Fantasy. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel for future episodes of the show. Before we move on to the footy, we've actually got a bit of an announcement. I wouldn't say an announcement, look for coming soon.
Ooh.
Hef, and I put this on the run sheet, so you just have to bear with me here. It's the DK Ashes. It's going to be starting this weekend, and if you've been following the DraftKings Australia Twitter handle, they've released their Ashes squad to take on the Poms in a series of DraftKings fantasy contests. So I'll actually be catching up with a few of the team members of Team Australia and Team UK later this week in the anticipation. So make sure you stay tuned to dailyfantasyrankings.com.au and you'll be able to receive the full podcast. Unlucky for us.
You didn't get in, Smatho.
Well, I've been,
I'm going to have to start calling you Jamie Cox.
Oh, maybe Mike Hussey, if you want to go that far.
That's ambitious to call yourself Mike Hussey, but Jamie Cox never got a look in. As good as he was, I think you fit the bill perfectly there.
Oh, look, I just put the runs on the board playing multiple sports throughout the fantasy concept, but I am on the bench ready and willing just in case something happens during the week, but stay tuned to DFR for that particular podcast. All right, Hef, let's move on to, Smatho's 2 thumbs up as I get my notes here from last week. Mate,
there was an easy one this week, isn't it?
Oh, look, I've got 6 days of footy to get through nominations. There were really some good ones here. On DraftKings, we had Schmacky, Don Seaton, JK, he managed to nab a win. Kurtos, Hilldog 53, who's a little Tassie bloke there. Big AJB as well on Draftstars. Then we had Pasco and Fishcake, who won another slate. Eddie 22, Reich 1, and look, couple of guys who deserve the thumbs up, but just due to the weight of numbers here, Stimpy. 870, I believe he absolutely smashed one Draftstars day. I think it was Sunday, I believe. And I am the game who also cleaned up as well. But my 2 thumbs up this week goes to a player, single bullets. I love the single bullets here on DFR here. Let me bring up J.K. Mawson with the winning lineup for Draftstars last night, Port Adelaide and the Western Bulldogs. I know we don't really look at single games that we haven't covered, Hef, but this is a pretty good side that JK won last night with.
Oh, yeah. I can never argue with a single bullet. Look at that team there. Robbie Gray, great to see Robbie Gray back in a bit of form. My favourite player at the moment is Peter Adams, and he gave your boy an absolute rubber-dub stitch-up last night, Peter Adams. Timmy English, I think Timmy English has passed on the mantle of the young up-and-coming ruckman to Laddams. And J.K. Mawson, he didn't miss him. There he is there with 104. What have you got to say for your boy, Smatho?
I think he's not much. Sorry.
How about Rockcliffe back in form too? 123. Wow.
Yeah, that's full of tackles, I do believe too. He was that's their fantasy gold when you can have a cuddle with the opposition. So
he's got the shortest stride in the competition, Tom Rockcliffe. I don't reckon he gets more than about half a metre in these little steps he takes. He just struts around there getting a lot of real cheap stuff, but that's all you need.
That's all you need. So you, J.K. Mawson, I'm sure you're a big fan of the show. If not, tell your mates to get onto the DFA Down Under show and get these 2 thumbs up for your win last night. You absolutely killed it. Special little shout out to Waddle D, who he had the single book last night. He came second and won everything else on Draftstars as well. But unfortunately, you don't get the 2 thumbs up. Goes to J.K. Mawson. So well done to you. Now, before we get on to the footy, just a reminder that the NBA target is being reduced by 5 points every day, Hef. And as a fellow winner of the NBA target, is there any keen advice for you just in case it doesn't go off tomorrow? I'm pretty keen it's going to go off this week. But is any advice for the viewers out there who's going to tackle the NBA target on Draftstars?
Pray for overtime. That would be my advice. What are we down to at the moment on this target?
We're down to 385 now.
Okay, it's starting to get in pretty good room. It usually goes off one of those days when there's a lot of injuries and you get a heap of obvious chalk value coming through, and one of the big guns goes berserk. I think Boogie Cousins had over 100 when I managed to grab a share of it, which unfortunately so did many other people that time. But love the target. Good to see it back.
It's over 22,000 in the kitty. So for $1 entry, have a crack at it. It's going to go off this week. I know there's only 3 or 4 games per slate, but the way the NBA's been playing since they've come back into the bubble, there's no defense at the moment, which means fantasy scoring. So
no, you can't catch the virus if you're not playing defense.
That's right.
You've got to throw the teams in for $1 too, don't you? Like if you it'd really take the gloss off a win if you passed up on a shot at the target. So that prize pool gets up there pretty quick.
All right. Let's get on to some AFL action, and we'll cover the doubleheader on Wednesday here in the AFL. Let's start with the first game, which is Geelong versus North Melbourne. Currently, the Cats are $1.40 favourites over the Kangaroos, who are $2.95. We're playing at the Gabba. The spread's at 15.5 and the total's 123.5, and there's no issues with the weather as well, so we should be fine for that. As for the fantasy sites, there's $50,000 doubleheader, which we'll be concentrating here on tonight's show, plus a $15,000 single contest for this one. And DraftKings have put up their offering of $6,000 for a $2K US dollar win to first as well. All right, in team news, I had to screenshot in team news. There's not usually just 1 or 2 out. There's a fair bit of movement here, but Jack Stephen, Joel Selwood, Reece Stanley up, and I wouldn't say Zach Guthrie, he's fantasy relevant, but they're the fantasy relevant guys back in there. Ben Brown, Jared Polak, a rookie, and a Lockie Hosey gets his start. We've lost Parfitt, we've lost Constable, we've lost Radigalia. We've lost
what was he at with Radigalia? Buried.
Managed.
Oh, yeah, managed. Oh, sorry. I thought he hadn't risen after Natanui did what he did to him the other night.
Yeah. No, you have to be managed after what happened to him. Lockie Hosey, he is I think he's a defender. I'm not sure. I might have to check that in a minute. But he did average 67 fantasy points from 8 games in the VFL last year.
He's a forward.
He's a forward, yes. Averaged 2 goals a game from those scores as well. So that's pretty good. He might be a good cheapy option. Now, the Cats are back in Queensland, which means they've left their Perth hub and they've only had a 4-day break. It's a short turnaround. Coach Scott said, no, don't worry about it. It's no excuses, but they've already managed a few players already. So, what's your initial thoughts on this particular matchup to start with?
Well, North haven't had the greatest amount of time off either, have they? They had a bit of an easier match against Adelaide when they gave an absolute spanking, and Geelong come off that really good match against West Coast, probably one of the games of the year. Yeah, you'd expect them to bounce back here, Geelong. You can't take any form line at all out of beating Adelaide, as we saw with Essendon last week getting flogged after giving Adelaide. Well, they only just squeaked past Adelaide, so that's probably fair enough. One thing about Geelong is they do have West Coast worked out, so I wonder if they were maybe a little bit flattered because they have shut down West Coast's uncontested game, and they always give them a good shake, but they'd still be expected to win here, I think, Geelong.
All right, let's move on to the rucks. And we've only got a choice of two this week, so there's no little cheapies to plug in. We've got Tug Godstein at 16,240. Reece Stanley's back at 11,050. I'm pretty much say Goldstein's pretty bulletproof in this particular matchup. His scores are around 85 on average in his last 5. I just can't really see Stanley either beating him or getting close to value. Would you think?
No, well, he scores okay still. There's still a 5,000 difference between them. But I do like Goldstein. I do like Goldstein on dry ground. We've talked about Ruckman being really suited in the wet, but he's a bit of a different beast, Goldstein. It was almost a bit like we've mentioned with English the past couple of weeks. Very good around the ground, so the dry ball would probably suit him more than anything, Goldstein. And I think there's enough value that we can play him there at the 16,000 quite comfortably.
All right, so let's move on to defence then. And then these two teams don't actually leak much fantasy scoring, and you can check that out on the DFR website in our points against tool. However, we saw Luke McDonald unleashed into the midfield last week and had his ceiling game. I know it's the Crows, but he made a lot of people a lot of money if you picked him in his side. So is Luke McDonald your first pick and then find someone else, or can we pivot away from him?
No, look, I'm staying away from Luke McDonald. Along with that big score comes a big rising price, 10,800. Not trying to get too caught up in a bit of that recency bias, and thinking about paying 10,800 for Luke McDonald is a few weeks ago you'd be considered mad. So I reckon I'll be staying away from Luke McDonald. What you say about these defenders, these two teams giving up points to defenders, Geelong are really hard to score against in defenders. We only had to look last week. Shannon Hearn, to a lesser extent, Brad Shepherd, really good, solid defenders there for the Eagles. Both had down games, especially in the first half when Geelong really had the clamps on them. So I'm leaning to playing Geelong backs. Zach Guthrie's an interesting one. I know you said he's not fantasy relevant, but the keen Geelong supporters who watch the VFL have been really impressed with Zach Guthrie. He comes in at 5,000, which is obviously basement price, and you usually only get to play something at 5,000 when they haven't played the game before. I'm not against throwing Zach Guthrie in a couple of lineups, to be honest, but I do think I'll be leaning to playing Geelong backs just because it's so hard to score against them for North Melbourne. And another point is don't get sucked into Mark Blixarves, because with Stanley back, his time in the ruck's going to be greatly reduced. So that's going to hurt the little bump he's had over the last couple of weeks.
So would you be interested in paying up to options such as like Menengola or Tom Stewart, Zach Tui at a stretch?
There was a bit of doubt over Tui, but interesting now we've got Tui in the forward line. We've got Menengola listed as a back. I love Cameron Guthrie, who seems to have just shed this tagger role that he's had, and he's just turned into just a out of nowhere little pig, Cam Guthrie. A couple of times he's had this play where he kicks it in, runs in from the kicking, gets it back, mark kick again, +9, thanks for coming. He's done that a few times in the last few weeks over there in WA. I'm really happy to play Guthrie again, even at that 14,000 price tag, because he's just turned into one of these guys who runs around doing whatever he likes in the midfield.
All right, let's move on to the mids. And as you can see, the the Kangas did have a day out against the Crows last week, so I'm not expecting these ceiling scores to come back again. So they now face the Cats, who are around the middle of the league for points against. So can I look at mids for North as a bit of a pivot, or should I be trusting Cats at this stage?
Look, I think you can. I think Geelong they are gettable in the midfield, definitely more so than they are by the back lines. Jed Anderson's going to be really popular after a couple of great games there. We've just got to be careful with these recent scores of North Melbourne, because they came off wet ground against Carlton, which did suit a few of their inside players. And then last week, obviously, you and I could probably get 20-odd touches run through the midfield against the Crows at the moment. So you get these big scores, the prices have gone up, and now you get a totally different kettle of fish here. So you've got to have a lot of caution, I think, with these Kangaroo midfielders. Anderson's the one who stands out as value. The class, though, is Sean Higgins. I don't expect a tag to go to him. And even though they've chopped and changed with his role this year, I think he's still the number one on the pecking order for me when it comes to North Melbourne. It's
going to be tough because there's over 6 players over 14,000. And then you've got Jed Anderson at 12.8. Oh, look, Menegal at 13.3. It's going to be a little tough one to figure out who's going to... You're going to probably pick 2 or 3 here.
Yeah, now, there's we've got to look at a couple of cheaper options somewhere. Now, we're going to get onto this in the forwards, but I want to bring up a guy called Brad Close, who's listed as a midfielder only. Now, the matchups for forwards against Kangaroos are quite reasonable. He's probably going to spend most of his game playing forward pocket, half forward flank type role. 39 against the Eagles last week isn't really inspiring, but he did score 67 in his first game over there. I can't think if it was Fremantle or Geelong. It was one of the two. But at 7,000, he did seem to be getting up the ground a little bit close, and he's a bit of a mature-aged rookie. So I think he is a guy who you can use to save a bit of salary.
Yeah, I don't mind him because he is a good forward pressure player. Yeah. So obviously the tackles come into play, but I think I found you can't miss him with his long sleeves, but he seemed to be doing a lot of handballs and kicking last week, which kind of annoyed me a little bit because you'd rather have the kicks and the marks than the handballs. But no, I like Close. I wish he was a forward. I'm not sure why he's a midfielder, but anyway, that's the data providers issue, and we just got to play along with that.
Yeah. One guy we've almost given up on, Sam Simpson, have we?
I think, I think we can give that.
He made me look stupid that first game back when he ended up with a ton, but since then we haven't seen a whole lot from him. I don't think that we've liked from a fantasy perspective, so he's one guy we can put the pen through, I think.
Look, we'll move on, but there's a couple of cheap options in Bonner and Scott for North Melbourne if you're really struggling at under.
Yeah, leave me out of Bonner. I don't think he's a footballer, Bonner.
Okay, fair.
I don't think he's a footballer. Scott's up and down. Obviously, son of the great Robert Scott. His old man to be torn on who to go for, but having played for both teams. But yeah, he's not a hopeless option, Scott. But yeah, I think Close is my favourite cheap option.
All right, okay. Well, let's move on to forwards. And I had here Parfitt. I'm going to be all over Parfitt, but he's not playing. So that just leaves Jai Simpkin at 13.2 as a mid-forward. But he's been woeful out of form. Bias might have to come into here if he's going to be back against the Cats, and go yourself. But I don't think he'll get much love on this one. Geez, there's not many options here. I'm only counting 8, 9, 8, 10. I don't know. Not many options here. And you got Ben Brown and Zerha and Will Walker and Lockley Hosey and Jack Stephen. There's not many players I like here. Let's be honest.
No, look, I think Hosey's in play just to that $5,000 price tag. It's pretty hard though. I don't like guys coming up against Geelong expecting to score points in the forward half of the ground. Will Walker's another guy at 5,000. Interesting player. He hasn't played since 2018, where he was just around the 40-50 mark. And I do remember his last game. He was carried off in the third quarter when he was looking okay on 40-odd, but still you're coming up against the Cats. It's a bit of a common theme we're coming up with this slate that the Cats are pretty hard to score against from a fantasy perspective. Now, on the flip side, North Melbourne, as I mentioned before, they're a bit easier to score for the Fords. So whether we look at Tommy Hawkins, who has had to deal with some tough defenders, some wet games, I think now he's going to get onto a dry deck. We saw probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, especially the game against Sydney, where he was starting to return to more of even a centre half forward role and get up the ground a bit. On the flip side, he's 11-7, so he's not cheap by any stretch. But you're right, we don't have too many forward options. Graham Mears is a guy who I think's got definite upside. 10,900, he's still pretty priced up there as well. I think we might have to use one of these 5K guys, Smatho, because these prices are pretty high on this slate.
Yeah, especially when you got no pay down ruck options, and you want all those 14K mids. Yeah, you might be taking the 2 5K guys just to pray.
Well, I don't know about both of them.
Oh,
I think one would be a miracle, and if you get 2 of them to score well, you might get hit by lightning. So just be careful.
yeah, fair enough.
Just be careful. But Ben Brown, it's hard to play him as well, isn't it? Maybe Tom Atkins returning. You got a bit more experience on his side. You got to pay a little bit more at 7,000, but a better matchup. He has a crack for you too, Tommy Atkins. Not the worst idea.
All right, make sure you read our daily fantasy preview for this particular match on Daily Fantasy Rankings, and make sure you check out the cheat sheet for this particular match as well. Let's move on to the second game of the doubleheader, and we've got the Adelaide Crows at $2.95, bottom of the ladder. They're taking on Melbourne at $1.40 at the Adelaide Oval in the late match, 8:10 p.m. start. Spreads also 15.5 with a total of 121.5. No issues in the weather in Adelaide, but it looks like a pretty cold night, minimum of 4 or 5 degrees, so might be a bit hard to play in that particular ground. Oh, talk about changes in the first game. Look at the changes in this second one. Let me have a look here. All right, Adelaide. Fogarty, McKay, McCasey, Scharenberg, Scholl, McHenry, Taylor Walker, and Tom Duday. Look,
it got a bit better at the end there, didn't it?
Tom Duday is pretty much the only one you're looking at out of the ins. We've lost McPherson, Gibbs, Strawny, Hardigan, Knight, Atkins, McAdam, and Tyson Stengel for the Crows.
Now, you're an ex-Carlton man. This could be we might not see Bryce Gibbs ever again.
No.
Is that a fair call?
I think that's a fair call. I mean,
he had his chance last week, and he did not take it.
No. Bye-bye. No. Bye-bye. For the Demons, Vandenberg, Tomlinson, Alex Newell, and Harley Bonella back. Kaiser Pickett, Hannon, and the 2 McDonalds have been omitted. In terms of the rookies, Scholl averaged 71 from 21 games in the sample last year. Looks like a bit of a rebounding defender. Schoenberg is averaged 76 in the sample resis, so he's a bit more greener than old Scholl. In terms of the fantasy sites, Draftstars, what do they put up for tomorrow? I think it's a $30,000 single contest.
25,000
there for
It'll
us.
Get to 30, I reckon.
Oh.
Once everyone's sort of sick of watching the Cats and Kangaroos low score and they realise they can play everyone on the whole slate here in Crows Demons, I reckon we'll see some teams pile in.
All right. So obviously these two teams got thrashed last week, let's be honest here, and they're back now playing some really cheap options. You can almost make any tide you want, as you just referred to, all these 5K options. So how are you going to attack this?
It's like the pre-season all over again, isn't it?
Yes.
You don't have to worry about money. It's hard because every player you look here has got an absolute plum matchup, except for maybe
the Rucks.
The Rucks. Poor old O'Brien. Everyone would be skipping around there at training, and he's thinking, he'd be on his new phone checking the status of Max Gone, and he's got some pretty bad news today because it looks like Maxie's good to go.
He is good to go. So Max is 18,780. Riley O'Brien's 14,970, and we still have Luke Jackson with his fantastic haircut, 5,880. So If you're playing Twitter polls and you decided to put a poll up, what would it say? And the percentage ownership for these three guys.
I'm taking a heap of Max, personally. See, there's the bit of narrative that the Max is a bit under the weather and a bit sore and whatever else. And if O'Brien really wants to bash and crash, he can. But Max just makes other ruckmen look stupid. How bad did he make Laddams look? And then we saw what Laddams came out and do last night. So he's just very hard to score against Max. So even if he happens to get, wow, you'd think he'd be getting. It's not a hard matchup against O'Brien, I don't think. Especially in the middle of the ground, he's pretty weak in the hit-out area, O'Brien, and Maxie's going to eat him for breakfast there. So he comes with a massive floor, and the double whammy that he's going to restrict O'Brien as well. So I've taken too many words to say what everyone else knows, and that's get Max in your lineups, especially with the amount of value we've got on this slate. It's 18,000. It's still pretty easy to fit him in, let's be honest.
Okay. Let's move on to defence, where, as you alluded to, both teams do leak a lot of points back here. So, obviously, with the Demons favourites in this game, I'm probably leaning towards them. Is there any on the Demons side that kind of stand up straight for you at this moment?
There's a bit of a narrative around Jake Lever, former Crow. He'll be very keen. Christian Salem, only 11,000. I think he's got definite upside. He's the guy that Melbourne will be wanting to get the ball to out of a lot of those average users down back. They're the two guys that sort of stand out to me there. I'm probably more interested in the Adelaide side of things. Love Duday. He's been a shining light in what's been an awful, awful season for Adelaide. He's under 10K. When he came into the league, he didn't look like he was going to be a big fantasy scorer, but he's just the total package today. I love him. Now, if you're looking for cheap guys, there's a bit of a spruik about Scholl from avid Adelaide fans. They've been a bit vocal that he hasn't got a game already, considering some of the tired old names they've been wheeling out week after week. So he's a $5,000 option for you there. And looking at Rory Laird, who's had a pretty plain season by his standards, but I did notice he was sneaking into the centre bounces a fair bit last week. So something to keep in mind there as well. But I think you can play a lot of these backs, and I'd probably just be looking to link a couple up from the same side and go from there.
All right, let's move on to the midfield. And then my first question to you straight away, Ben Keys has been trying to do a tag job on midfielders this year. Obviously, there's pretty much just one clear target in Oliver. Do you think Keys will do a job on him?
I would tag Petrarca, personally. I couldn't give stuff if Oliver's got the ball, because you have a chance to get it back the way he's going lately. I don't think Keys would be capable of tagging Oliver. I think he's too good in the contest for him, Oliver. And the way Keys has been going, he's almost their best midfielder at the moment, which is just incredible to say. But, I'm not convinced he will do a job. Petrarca's the guy that you'd want to shut down. I don't know if Keys would be capable of doing that either. So, I'm not too worried about Ben Keys, and I think he's more on the radar as a good option himself at 10,000.
What about the rest of these Adelaide midfield? Paul Seatsman's is starting to get up in price at 13K. The Crouch brothers are still there. There's only one Crouch.
No, Brad's pinged the hammy. Matt's there, but Matt's not getting. He's not getting into the centre bounces as much as we used to.
We might have to check out the CBA's tool on the DFR website to have a look at that. So
beautiful little segue there, Smatho.
Yeah, but 13,000 for Seatsman is kind of a price that is kind of good, I suppose. Considering Melbourne has Oliver, Petrarca, and then that's it.
Yeah. I think that's how their scoring goes as well. They have Gawn, Oliver, Petrarca, and then it falls right away. Now, we know Adelaide, the midfield in Adelaide is the best place to target, and it just seems like we see some huge scores. We saw Zach Merritt near get 140 against them a couple of weeks ago. Jed Anderson's coming off mid-120s. We saw Luke McDonald get as much as he likes. You got to look at guys like Oliver and Petrarca as going huge. So despite the price, despite paying up 18,000 for Max Gawn, I think those guys are going to be really popular, as they probably should be. Now, Harry Schoenberg's a guy I'm pretty interested in playing, because on the flip side, Melbourne have been quite a good team to target themselves when you're looking for midfielders. So he probably stands out to me as the best cheap option of all these new players that we're dealing with. And the other cheap guy I really like is Tom. Is it Tom Sparrow? The fart. He's the. He had a lot of time in the centre bounces in his first game for the season last week against Port Adelaide. The trusty little tool. He spent more than half of the centre bounces right in there getting amongst it. And even though he only scored 42, Port Adelaide are a very hard team to score against, and he's going to find this like chalk and cheese against the Crows. So under 6,500, love Tom Sparrow.
Love it. All right, let's move on to forwards. And you look at the list here. Look at it. It's Petrarca, Tom Lynch, and then Poop after that. Let's just like all these little 7K, 8K, 6K options here that you probably need to take one of these guys to make your team work, unless you go right down to Fisher. No, you can't go to Fisher at 5K.
Oh, so, we can. I've gone early on Sparrow. He's a forward.
Yeah, he's a forward. I was looking for him. 6,460.
Wow, we're set here. Petrarca and Sparrow. Let's go back to the mids. Yeah, no, wow. That just seems optimal to me. Who else can we play?
Look, Bailey Fritsch at 9.4, Alex Neil-Bourne 8.8. So if we play...
Melksham 8,000, that's...
So if everyone gets a boost, possibly these guys could achieve a ceiling score that in those 70, 80, 90s possibly. Could win you a slate.
Yeah, we might have to use Petrarca in the midfield if we can't find the value in the midfield, we get it in the forward line instead. But I've got a soft spot for Snake Melksham. He's put it together a couple of really big scores in games where I've needed him to. So at 8,000, like 60 odd against Adelaide's right in his hitting zone, and he's a guy who could get you 80 at that $8,000 range. So he's definitely in play for me, Melksham. Fritsch on the opposite, he's a guy I can't catch at all. Fritsch, so if you can, he's playable. I probably won't be too heavy on Fritsch because it just never works out for me. But I still find it hard to go away from the Sparrow-Petrarca combination here, Smatho.
Yep. I think you tried to make an argument and you just lost interest after a sentence. So
I had a bad poker face. I got far too excited when I heard this was doable. But yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, all right. So the slate clocks at 5:40 tomorrow. So make sure you get your double-headed teams. And this second game, it locks at a bit after 8. So make sure you get the dailyfantasyrankings.com.au for all your tools that you need for this particular double-header. All right, Hef, we might wrap up the show with this one here. Is there any final thoughts before we leave it today?
No, just put yourself through the pain of the Cats and the Kangas and then sit back and watch the points pour in on Adelaide, Melbourne.
All right. Before we go, quick question then. Will you stack this last game or try and have a balanced approach between the two?
Look, Melbourne stacks have definitely got to be in play. I think well, Adelaide's all priced down, but they're priced pretty reasonably, I think, coming off that loss to Port Adelaide. And there's no better target in the comp than Adelaide. So, yeah, Melbourne stacks definitely in play.
Excellent. All right. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel for future episodes of the show. Hef and I will be back next Tuesday for our next edition of the DFR Down Under show. Hopefully we're not snowed in tomorrow. Hef, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, we've got a double header on Wednesday. Since when do we have that? What a day to get snowed in.
What a day to get snowed in. All right. Thanks for joining us on the show, and we'll catch you next time. See you then.
All right. See ya.